In this video, I'm gonna be giving you some crazy facts about every single devil fruit in Blox fruits. Starting off, we got the rocket fruit, and this is the cheapest fruit in the whole game, but at least it has a decent movement ability. But keep in mind, it is still the cheapest, but that does not mean it's the worst. Next up, we got the spin fruit, and in my opinion, this is the literal worst fruit in the whole game, because it doesn't even have a decent movement ability like the rocket fruit. It's just overall terrible, and I recommend if you have this fruit, immediately get your hands on a new one. Next up, we got the chop fruit, and this actually seems bad at first sight, but there's one special thing that this fruit has that separates it from all the other terrible fruits, and that is its immunity to sword damage. You literally can't take damage to anyone with swords. This counts for NPCs and players, even if they have hockey or not. And this is literally one of the best passive abilities in the whole game, but the abilities themselves are pretty terrible. Next up, we got the spring fruit, and a pretty cool thing about this fruit that you might have not known is that the movement ability of the spring fruit, which is called spring leap, is actually faster than the light fruit, but that's only the movement itself. The way you use the movement ability is much different to the light fruit, because for this you actually need walls nearby, and it's pretty hard to find those sometimes. And keep in mind, the longer you use the ability, the faster you get, so technically it's possible to get infinite speed with the movement ability. Next ability we got here is the bomb fruit, and the bomb fruit actually has the longest knockback out of every single fruit in the game. Like, the self-destruct ability actually sends you flying, and I've never seen any other fruit in the game do this. Next up, we got the smoke fruit, and this is the only elemental fruit in the game without an awakening, but it is still the best cheap option for grinding because it's elemental, and the F ability smoke bomber makes it incredibly easy to farm people. Next up, we got the spike fruit, and a pretty cool thing that you might have not known about this fruit is that the longer you hold the key for the Z ability, the bigger the spikes are. So if you literally just click the ability, it's gonna look like this, and if you hold it down, it's gonna look like this. You see the difference? It's pretty crazy. Next up, we got the flame fruit, and here's a cool fact about the V2Z ability. Blue fire bullets. Everyone knows that it went through multiple changes, but the reason they settled with blue fire bullet is to actually symbolize the awakening of the flame fruit, because in real life, blue fire actually burns a lot hotter than orange fire, which shows how powerful the awakened flame is. Next up, we got the falcon fruit, and this is probably the worst beast fruit in the whole game, and the fact for this is that all the abilities of the fruit are completely useless without the wings. Next up, we got the ice fruit, and a lot of you might have not known this, but when you use the ice trident to farm NPCs and you have your hockey activated, you will actually gain absolutely no hockey, and the reason for that is because you're still technically using a devil fruit, even if it may look like a sword. Next up, we got the sand fruit, and the special thing about the sand coffin ability that this fruit has, it's actually inspired by a Naruto character named Gaara, and he used this in an episode to seal Madara, and the ability itself looks a lot different to what it looks like in the anime. Next up, we got the dark fruit, and the thing a lot of you guys might have not known is that in One Piece, it actually disables the abilities of other fruits when you're fighting against them, but I guess that would be way too overpowered to add to Blox fruits. That's the reason the developers didn't do it. Good call on their part. Next up, we got the diamond fruit, and I'm specifically talking about the C ability for this, Diamond Hail. This ability is actually copy-pasted from one of my game 43's old games, and that game is Elemental Battleground. And if you're wondering what ability I'm talking about in specific, it's the ice ability. They literally look exactly the same. Next up, we got the light fruit, and everyone knows this is the fastest traveling fruit in the whole game. Well, that's only when it comes to movement, I guess. Next up, we got the rubber fruit, and this is something a lot of you might have not known. It's the fact that it doesn't take any damage from the rumble fruit, no matter if you have hockey on or not, and also it doesn't take any damage from every gun in the game as well as the electric fighting style. You can still use stuff like electric claw though, so it isn't completely broken. Next up, we got the berry fruit, and the thing you guys might not know is that the barriers are completely invincible. Like, you can use the strongest ability in the whole game on these barriers and they will literally not break at all, and the only way to get around them is to literally get around them. You have to go around. Next up, we got the ghost fruit, and for this one, once you die, you spawn back in with half health, but there's a pretty cool glitch you can do is to actually transfer the ghost effect to different fruits, and this is what that looks like. It's pretty cool. Next up, we got the magma fruit, and this is a fruit in the game that actually does the most damage, and the reason for that is when you use the abilities of the V2 magma fruit, it actually leaves behind these humongous blobs of magma, and if you count the damage from those, it's literally unmatched in damage, and this is the reason it makes it the best for boat raids, and sea beast hunting. It's the second best fruit in the game when it comes to grinding. Next up, we got the Quake fruit, and I'm specifically talking about the V2Z ability, Fatal Demolisher. A pretty cool thing that you might have not noticed about this ability is that it's extremely similar to the Sharkman Karate C ability, where the ability sucks you in, holds you for a second, and then throws you away. Next up, we got the Buddha fruit, and this is no surprise, it's literally the best fruit for grinding in the whole game. Once you use your transformation, your hitbox is actually 8 times what it normally is, but your range is also increased to 8 times, which makes it extremely overpowered. Next up, we got the love fruit. A pretty cool fact about this fruit is that it was actually updated on Valentine's Day last year. It used to be kind of terrible before, but now it's kind of decent, I guess. And also the movement ability is pretty cool. Next up, we got the spider fruit, and this fruit actually used to be called the string fruit, but it was changed because of copyright. Next up, we got the sound fruit, and a pretty interesting fact about this fruit is that every single move that this fruit has is actually area of damage, which makes it extremely good for grinding, and the effects also look incredibly amazing, probably one of the best in the whole game. Next up, we're moving on to the phoenix fruit. The cool thing about this fruit is that it only has 2 abilities to do damage. The rest of its abilities are transformation, its regeneration, and its wings. Kind of interesting why you need a transformation and a wings ability, whatever works, I guess. Next up, we got the portal fruit, and remember before how I said the light fruit is the fastest fruit in the whole game? Well, this is technically faster, but you don't actually move, I guess, you teleport. And another interesting fact about this fruit is that it actually used to be called the door fruit, and this also got changed for copyright because the fruit was a direct copy paste from One Piece. Next up, we got the rumble fruit, and one of the abilities of this fruit is actually inspired by a jutsu from Naruto, specifically the one Sasuke uses right here called Kirin. The similarities are unmatched. Next up, we got the pain fruit, and this fruit actually used to be called the paw fruit, but it was changed for copyright reasons, just like so many other fruits on this list. But the cool thing about this fruit is that the abilities still have paws, which I guess is to reminisce about when the fruit used to be called paw. Only OGs remember this. Next up, we got the blizzard fruit. I'm talking specifically about the Z ability for this one, snow shuriken. A cool fact you might have not known is that the more you charge up the ability, the more shuriken you will actually throw. If you're in a PvP fight, sometimes it's better to not actually stand still because then you're very vulnerable to attacks. You have to always keep moving. But if you're fighting against NPCs, then it's good to hold down this ability because you obviously want to prioritize your damage over your movement. Next up, we got the gravity fruit, and this is the worst mythical fruit in the whole game, but it is also the cheapest mythical fruit, and it's also the worst option for PvP. So if you're a bounty hunter, make sure you do not get your hands on this fruit. You could probably get a fruit that's 10 times better for like half the price. Like take the magma fruit, for example. That's like a lot better. And the Buddha fruit. These are all fruits that are underneath this. Man, why isn't the Buddha fruit a mythic fruit? It's one of the most OP fruits in the game. Next fruit we got here is the mammoth fruit, and this is actually something that was added in update 20, and it is a very, very cool fruit. And the fact for this one is that the movement ability, the F ability here, is actually infinite. Like as long as you hold down the key, you can keep the ability going forever. But the difference between this movement ability and most of the other infinite movement abilities in the game is that this one actually does damage. It might not be a huge amount, but you can use this for farming. Next fruit we got on this list is the T-Rex fruit. And these two fruits actually give me similar vibes. Maybe because they're both like prehistoric creatures, or whatever. The fact about the T-Rex fruit is that you'll actually have a tail when you have the fruit equipped. Which is pretty weird because when you switch to a fighting style or a gun, that tail automatically disappears. Nope. Makes no sense. How can you regrow and grow a tail so quickly? Well, I guess it is a game after all. It doesn't really need to make sense. Next fruit we got here is one of the most satisfying fruits in the whole game, and I'm obviously talking about the dough fruit. And for specifics, I'm going to be talking about the V2 of this fruit, as well as the movement ability. Did you know that the roller donut in its V1 form actually does absolutely no damage? It can go up walls or ride on water. But once you awaken the movement ability, it changes its looks to be a lot better. But the looks are not the only thing that have changed. You can actually now do damage with this movement ability as well. And if you turn on your hotkey, the roller donut also glows with that color. And you can actually pull enemies with the donut, which look very, very cool. And next up, we got a fact about the shadow fruit. And everyone knows that the shadow fruit has an umbra meter. And a lot of you might be wondering, what the heck does umbra even mean? Well, it actually means shade / shadow in Latin, which is a pretty cool thing because it fits the whole shadow vibe. Next up, we got the venom fruit. And a pretty cool fact about this fruit, it kind of does the opposite of our expectations. Everyone knows that every movement ability in this game is actually slower depending on how low your health is. But for the venom fruit, it's completely opposite. The lower your health, the faster your movement ability travels, which is pretty weird because it's completely different from the other fruits. So now I guess you know what fruit to equip if you're very low on health and need to run away from a battle. Imagine if you're 1 HP. Does that mean you're faster than the light fruit? I guess we'll never know. Next up, we got the control fruit. And there's a lot of cool facts I can tell you guys about this fruit. But the coolest one I found is that you can send boats flying while you're sitting on them. This might be patched now, but you could do it at some point. Next up, we got the spirit fruit. And comparing this to its One Piece version, it's actually slightly different. In One Piece, the owner of the spirit fruit can actually give a soul to anything that's non-living, which would be extremely overpowered in this game. Imagine you could give life to anything that you can pick up with the control fruit. It would be way too overpowered. Next up, we got the dragon fruit. And this is something I actually did not know for a while. You can change the color of the transformation. All you have to do is equip your dragon fruit, head over to the first sea, and specifically in Skylands, you see these rings here, and fly through them. It actually completely changes the color. There's some colors only admins can get, and the pink dragon is only available to rip Indra. Next fruit we got here is the leopard fruit. And the cool fact about this this fruit is it actually does damage upon transformation. You see how the leopard roars when you transform? Well, that roar actually does a bit of damage. And there's not much practical use to this really. I guess it's just a cool fact to know because there's no way you're going to be using this in a PvP. Next up, we got the kitsune fruit. And the fact about this fruit was actually formerly held by the leopard fruit. And that's being the most expensive fruit in the whole game. The leopard fruit used to be the most expensive, coming in at 5 million belly. But when the kitsune come out, the devs decided to give it a price tag of 8 million. That is a lot of belly. And that's it for the facts.